knew what the consequences might be. It's not too late. But here's what the science is saying as of now. If we analyze those 620 papers, which we divided into 12 categories, and if we looked at the category of health effects, direct health effects, health impacts on humans, as of June of this year, there were 16 peer-reviewed, only 16 peer-reviewed papers in the public literature. And of those 16, 87% concluded the health effects are bad. 13% concluded can't measure any health effect. None of them concluded that we've improved our health by shale gas development, but 13% no, we don't see any effect. 87% said yes. Water quality. As of June of this year, there were 30 peer-reviewed publications. 73% said water quality is diminished by shale gas development. 27% said no effect. None of them said it improved water quality. And finally, air quality. 26 papers as of June of this year. 92% conclude that the air impacts have been negative, bad. 8% say no measurable effect. So, let me summarize what I just said, as briefly as I can. We didn't know much when we got started. We meaning us, because we permitted it. Pennsylvania welcomed shale gas development with open arms. And even my friend Terry Engeller at Penn State says we weren't prepared for it. We've had 2 revisions to the Pennsylvania regulations. They don't seem to be having much effect on water well contamination. The science has grown very rapidly. We're still in the middle of a rapid technological expansion and a technological gamble that when the final chapter is written on shale gas development in Pennsylvania and around the world, that it will turn out okay. I doubt it. Because we're going to continue to have water well contamination, the data shows it. We're going to continue to have leakage of methane into the atmosphere, the data now show it. And that leakage into the atmosphere is going to have, and continues to have, and will continue to have profound effects on making climate change worse, not better. Natural gas is not a bridge to the future, it's a gangplank. I've said that before, I say it again, and I'll conclude with that by thanking you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, we're now going to begin the question and answer session. This event is being recorded, so we're going to ask that you raise your hand and wait until we come to you with a microphone before asking your question. We're going to give students the chance to ask the first few questions, but just everyone raise your hands and we will get to you.
He's a real young student.
If the loss at a big launcher at 1,000 psi is significant, then what about the flaring of the wells for days?
Excellent question. I didn't show any flaring because most people, including me, thought that flaring meant flaring. It meant burning natural gas during the flowback period. After fracking, there's a period of flowback of the fracking fluid that has large amounts of sand and flowback fluid mixed with natural gas. That has to be separated out. The gas is supposed to go to a stack, it's supposed to go to a flare and be burned. Flares, theoretically, are about 98% effective. That's what the EPA says. 98% of the methane that goes to a flare gets burned and is converted into carbon dioxide and water. Of course, that's ideal. But many of you have seen online videos in which flares fail to light. In other words, they're just emitting. They're venting methane, it's not being burned. That's quite common. It's also common for a flare to go out for a period of time. The flame goes out, the gases are still being emitted. Those pressures can be higher than 1,000 psi, depends upon the well. Really, really productive gas wells in Susquehanna County can produce at over 1,000 psi at the wellhead. So that's an answer to your question. It is a concern. And again, the EPA does not count methane emissions from flaring. They presume that flaring is 98% effective and that the flares are always lit.
To follow on that, I would presume that not only does EPA not count the gas that is flared or otherwise lost as part of the methane problem, but that gas is also not being counted as part of the revenue base for the landowner, which you mentioned earlier briefly in passing.
That's absolutely correct. If you're a landowner and you're watching that flare out in the lower 40, that's your methane going into the atmosphere, whether it's being burned or vented. And by the way, let me remember right now what Nathan Soy asked me to tell you, which is in Pittsburgh, when?
Tuesday, September 29th.
Tuesday, September 29th, there will be a publicly open opportunity to tell the EPA what your thoughts are about methane. If you can make it to Pittsburgh, please do so.
We've got buses, and we'll make it cheap. And anyone who wants to sign up for a bus, when this is over, we'll be at our tables, the Sierra Club and Clean Water Action downstairs.
Thank you.
All right, here, Noel, here. Hi. Out of curiosity, in terms of the extraction activities, do they have now, or do they have the potential to mess with the earth, for instance, in terms of earthquakes and stuff like that? Because some of the extractions in terms of the vertical and horizontal drilling seems pretty intense, and I'm just wondering if they could, or do they have any impact in terms of earthquakes and what could happen with that, the Earth's mantle?
See if I understand the question. I'll rephrase it. Is there a way, other than the way they're currently doing things, to have less impact? Is that basically it?
Could that...
I can hear you better without it.
Okay. Could the extraction activities lead to earthquakes and other like natural disasters in terms of the drilling? I don't know if you know anything.
Okay, yeah, I got the question. Could extraction activities of the type we talked about not lead to natural disasters? They could lead to unnatural disasters. So somebody shouted out earthquakes. So there have been significant human-induced seismicity events in places where we would not expect them over the last few years: Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Ohio. Those events are unnatural. They're not quite disasters in the sense that they have been of significant magnitude, significant enough magnitude to cause significant damage and loss of life on the surface. But they have been significant enough to cause damage to underground structures, i.e. the wells themselves. There's also a trend now documented by the USGS and by the the Canadian Oil and Gas Commission, that the magnitude of human-induced seismicity, both from waste injection and from fracking itself, continues to rise. Most of the events have been magnitude 2 or lower. We're now seeing events in the 4s and 5s. So the amount of waste being injected and the pressures and volumes being used in frac jobs all continue to go up. The more fluid that's injected at a higher pressure, the higher the probability you're going to mobilize a significant part of a pre-existing dormant fault. Other kinds of unnatural disasters, explosions, pipeline explosions. You've seen events in New York City over the past couple of years where people have been killed because of distribution pipeline explosions from pipelines that were laid 100 years ago. You can't dig up all the streets of New York in a period of a few years and replace the hundreds of miles of cast iron pipeline there or in Washington, D.C. It's going to take decades during that period of time, those pipelines that are already decrepit are going to become even more decrepit. So we should expect an increasing rate of what I would call a disaster, when an entire apartment complex or a block explodes and 8 or more people are killed, like happened in New York City and in San Bernardino, California. That's significant. Not much you can do about it. It is what it is.
Dr. Ingraffea, I had the privilege of hearing you speak years ago at Penn State. And because of the situation that we're in with this, not having the collaboration of the scientific community, the government community, working together to embrace this global problem, do you think for us in Pennsylvania, the best approach would be to seek a moratorium on this whole industry, to get a grip and put pressure on the Congress to come up with an energy policy for our country? You mentioned the dangers of the pipelines. What about the trains that are carrying the crude oil that's coming through communities and posing a threat? Don't you think we need to halt it all?
Bomb trains?
Excellent question. Let me answer first from a Pennsylvania point of view, and then I'll go to what you refer to as the national point of view. By freaky coincidence, maybe bad luck, maybe good luck, depending upon how you look at it, the value of gas and oil coming out of the ground has crashed. So we have a natural respite, or an unnatural respite, in which it would be more reasonable to seek a moratorium in Pennsylvania now than it would have been 3 or 4 years ago, when companies were making money. It's very hard to stop an express train. It's very easy to stop a caboose that's already stopped on the tracks. So there are very few new wells being drilled every day in Pennsylvania. There are now 33 drill rigs in the entire state, down from a peak of 115. 33 drill rigs. So if you were to push the governor and Mr. Quigley to say, now is the time, we have this respite, companies aren't going to be complaining so much that they're going to lose a lot of money if we slow them down, stop them temporarily. They'd probably be grateful. Let them keep producing from the wells that are already in production, but have a moratorium on any new production or any new drilling until the science catches up and there are conclusions that can be made by reputable organizations appointed by the governor and the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, like we did in New York State. Have your Department of Health, have your DEP collaborate, get together a blue ribbon panel, look at all the same data that everybody else is now looking at, which is accumulating daily, and make a conclusion. Should Pennsylvania continue on its present course, which is maybe a couple wells coming into production every week for the foreseeable future, or should we just open it up and as the market responds, maybe the price of oil comes back up, price of gas comes back up, and the drilling and production rate goes up? Should we prohibit that? Or should we even go any farther, and say, since production in Pennsylvania is actually on the decline, for the first time this month, total production from the Marcellus decreased from previous month. All the shale gas and shale oil plays in the U.S. are currently in decline. They're all producing less than they were producing a month ago. And that's going to continue as long as the prices are like this. So I'm spending a lot of words answering a very simple question. Yes, now is the time. There's never been a better time to bring everybody to the table. Bring Chesapeake to the table, bring Chevron to the table, bring Exxon to the table. They'll probably breathe a sigh of relief and say, If there was ever a time for us to go into moratorium, it's now. My God, we won't have to go borrow another $6 million to drill a well that we can't really drill because we don't want to. Now, on a national scale, worst problem. What's a national moratorium look like? Are you going to stop all oil and gas development in the entire United States? We can't do that. We can't shut off today all oil and gas development. We still drive cars. We still fly in airplanes. Many of you still heat your home with gas. Until we can catch up and make substitutions for all those energy uses, which we are doing at a rapid pace and at an increasingly rapid pace with wind and solar and water. Now is the time for breathing room. But getting that to happen on a national scale where you might have a Democratic president, but he doesn't believe what I just said tonight. And if you happen to get the next president to be Hillary Clinton, she doesn't believe what I said tonight. And if you get one of the 11 people in debate tonight and they become president, they certainly don't believe anything I said tonight.
Bernie.
So what I'm saying is you have a better chance, you've never had a better time for a chance for a moratorium in Pennsylvania now, but if you got it stopped in New York State, it's temporarily stopped in Maryland. If you can slow it down, temporarily halt it in Pennsylvania, let the market dictate what's happening in other places. There's not going to be big shale gas development in Illinois and North Carolina and Georgia and Florida like they were predicting. It's not going to happen. Nobody's going to do it for $1.70. So you can thank the Saudis for this.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions.
One more.
How does the amount of methane produced by the natural gas extraction and distribution compare to the methane produced from agricultural sources?
Excellent question. There was a time back in, another graph here, back in about 2000 when the EPA's estimates for the methane budget, methane coming from all sources in the U.S., had agriculture as #1 producer of methane. That's now #2. #1 is oil and gas operations. And if you send me your email address or call me or something, I'd be glad to send you that report. So, quick answer to your question is, methane production from oil and gas operations is now the largest producer of methane in the U.S. Agriculture #2.
Professor, thanks for coming and speaking. My question is concerning the global warming potential. Big gap between long-term and short-term, and I'm aware that some of the criticism you receive is your understandable focus on the short-term effects. What's more confusing to me, aside from the possibility of personal gain as a motivation for folks to concentrate on the long-term effects, how is there such a big disparity going in the opposite direction of every other either linear or exponentially increasing graph of negative effects? I guess my question is, when you said earlier comparing a kilogram of methane to a kilogram of carbon dioxide in terms of its global warming potential in a 20-year or 100-year cycle, if the 100-year period is so much lower, is that because it's just viewed statically, or I guess I don't understand why is that the only thing that goes down in a series of graphs where everything else seems to go up?
Let me try to explain. I think I mentioned during my talk that the carbon dioxide molecule that gets into the atmosphere will be there for over 1,000 years. So a lot of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere right now doing us harm got in there when they started burning coal in profuse amounts in England in the 1700s. Methane, CH4 as opposed to CO2, only remains methane in the atmosphere for about 12 years. Then it decays into carbon dioxide and other gases that I don't remember. So instantaneously, the effect, in the first minute, the global warming potential of methane is over 100 times that of carbon dioxide because they're both in the atmosphere heating. Over 100 years, carbon dioxide is continuously heating, but over the first 12 years, methane is heating at less and less a rate. And so if you average over 100 years, it turns out that that factor of 100 is 0, and a factor of 86 at 20, and a factor of 34 at 100 is the average effect over 100 years. That's basically the reason. The residence time in the atmosphere of methane is only about 12 years.
That concludes the Q&A session. Thank you for coming, and please join me in thanking Dr. Graham.